Okay, and you should all see my screen. Now, this webinar goes over SNMP, as April mentioned. And as the application engineer for Kepware, I do these webinars. I do training on-site as well as here in Portland, along with a team of others that help me out with that. And if you want any information beyond what we present today, or you are interested in attending some of those training classes, please contact us. It's training@kepware.com, and we'll send you more info. This webinar is part of our webinar series. We do webinars at least once monthly. Next month, February, we're releasing version 5.14 of KEPServerEX. We'll have a webinar on that. And then we'll continue in March with our Beyond Device Connectivity webinar on advanced tags. I have another applications engineer with me, Sam Elsner. He's going to be answering your questions that you type into the question pane. He will be answering those as I present. If he sees a good question come through that would be relevant to the entire audience, he's going to go ahead and pass that to me, and I'll answer it live for everybody else. So go ahead, you can type those questions into your question pane, and he'll answer as we go through this. Now, you saw that poll at the beginning, what part of the world are you from? We're going to have polls throughout this webinar to kind of check your level of experience and make sure that we're gauging this webinar correctly to you as the audience. Also, we have quite a few people on this call, and we should be able to get some pretty statistically significant results, which will be definitely interesting for everybody here to see. So we're going to share those results, those poll results with you as we go through the webinar, as well as publish them in our blog afterwards. All right, and now let's begin, of course, with another poll. So first thing I want to know, how much experience do you have configuring KEPServerEX? We're going to do some demos and other application-specific configuration here. So I want to know, how experienced are you? Okay, thanks for answering. Looks like a lot of you are coming through. Just going to leave it up for a couple more seconds. And we're almost to the 90% answered mark. I'll cut it off once 90% of you are in. Okay, great. I'll share that with you. Looks like we got a good spread. 30% beginners, and then we do have a few quote-unquote experts on the line, so that's good to see. So we have a varied experience here. So I'll try to, for the beginners, definitely explain as much as I can, but for those of you who are experts or have some experience with software, we'll keep it short and sweet as possible. Okay. On with the rest of the presentation. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to start with some general knowledge for SNMP that's not Kepware specific, and then go into a very brief overview of the SNMP agent plugin and a much more detailed overview and a demo of our SNMP driver. Now, before we begin with getting into some of the nitty-gritty details of SNMP, I want to begin with just a very quick breeze-through demo of how to set up SNMP connectivity with KEPServerEX. I'm going to go through it very quickly right now, just to show you how we can connect pretty simply, and then I will walk through it much more slowly, step by step, when we get to the demo portion of the webinar. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and open KEPServerEX here. This is our configuration window. We're going to add a channel. I'm just going to name this SNMP, and of course select our SNMP driver. no virtual network, choose my network adapter. If you select default, it's always going to choose the first network adapter in your bind order, and you don't necessarily know what that is, so I always make a point to choose my network adapter specifically so I know where I'm connecting. Leave this at default, leave this at default, and then we're done for a channel. So really the only thing I did on the channel level was choose my network adapter card and the SNMP driver. Now I'd make a device. I know my device IP. We have it networked here. And then I'm basically just going to click through this real fast. I know I'm running version 2C, and all the rest of these are basically just default. And you see that it's trying to automatically generate tags from the device itself, and then I have some tags that were just automatically populated for me here. So if I launch my quick client, and if all is well, in a moment here, it will update, and I'm connected to that device and getting information from that device. So, 2 minutes, not a lot of time took me to set that up. All I really needed was some details on the device, its IP address, what version of SNMP it was running, and I was up and running. Okay, so like I said, we're going to walk through that much more slowly, but I just wanted to show you it right off the bat. Now let's get into some good SNMP overview information. So SNMP, what does it stand for? It's Simple Network Management Protocol. And those of you who know SNMP might say that it's not so simple. But it is used for a variety of networked components. It's an open standard, and some of these devices include things like UPSs, RTUs, smart switches, and more. So you're working on this network layer of the stack. And what it enables is typically, when it first came out, it was used in the IT profession and for network administrators. So they used it to manage and monitor network performance. If there was a switch down or something was wrong with the network, they would be able to find where that problem was originating, and then obviously plan for network growth. Now, SNMP has certainly branched out of the IT and network administration space. And I'd say that in my experience, what I've seen is that there's been a definite melding of the process engineer, automation engineer role and the IT network administrator role. Those have kind of started to combine. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, does your role in your company involve IT? Are you coming at this from an IT perspective or a process control perspective? And then before I continue, I want to know what your experience is with SNMP. So go ahead and answer this poll very quickly. And it looks like a lot of you are responding there. That's great. And this is pretty much what I expected as far as results. All right, we're almost done. You guys are very quick on this poll, so that's good. Okay, great. I'm going to go share that with you. So pretty much as I expected, a lot of you are coming from the process control or automation engineering perspective, but a good percentage of you, a third of you, actually do dabble in both those roles. So that's very good to know. All right. And then next, what is your experience with SNMP? Do you consider yourself a beginner or an expert or somewhere in the middle? Okay. This poll is also shaping up as I expected, and you guys are also quick here. So we will be able to close this poll out in just a couple seconds. Okay. And there we go. We see that about half of you consider yourself no experience whatsoever. We got maybe 5 experts on the line, it looks like. So that's very interesting. Okay. Well, for the people who are a little more technical on the call, SNMP is an application layer protocol, so it's part of the TCP/IP protocol suite. and it's maintained by an independent group called the Internet Engineering Task Force. So you can go to IETF.org for more detailed information. Right now, and especially since we have about half of you as beginners on the call, we're going to go over some terminology. And of course, with any protocol, you're going to have kind of a new dictionary, a new language that you have to learn. And SNMP is certainly no exception. So we're going to go over some of the terminology, not all, and I'm going to explain basically these broad concepts to you before we move on to the demo. Okay, so SNMP managers are in the middle part of this architecture here. And they're much like a server in the fact that they communicate to devices and then serve information up to potentially higher level systems like network management systems. And SNMP is the backbone of the communication here. So we have SNMP managers that are kind of driving this communication, requesting information from devices, and maybe rolling that information up to higher level systems. So how do managers access information from devices? Well, they use something called a management information base. And what this is a file, and it's local to a device or available for downloads on the web. And it basically acts as a reference list for the manager to go and point to information in the device and find the correct information that it's looking for. And it contains the definition and addressing for items available on this device. The items in the MIB file are organized in a hierarchy like XML. And so if an object is not defined in the MIB, the manager is not going to know where to go find it, and thus it doesn't really exist to the manager. It can't see it. So this structure is kind of similar to the HMI server device structure in OPC. This manager is acting as this hub of information. And in OPC we have tags. In an OPC server you have tags. In SNMP you'll have this management information base with these pointers. So an SNMP manager basically is going to use this file, which here's an example of it, to access information in the device. And this information in the device, this example is from Microsoft, and it's just a quote-unquote smart toaster that maybe you're trying to talk to. So you as a user might be interested in information about this toaster, like whether the toast is down or up. So we see each item listed in this MIB that's relevant to the toaster, and each item is assigned an index number. So toaster is assigned 2, the manufacturer number is assigned an index number of 1. So if I want to access information about the toaster manufacturer, I have to enter a string of numbers, 12.2.1, and I get to this. And then if I enter 12.2.1.2, then I would get to the toaster model number, and so on and so forth. So you have an index number assigned to these objects, and as you go down the file, you append that index number to get to the object information. And that is what the manager is using, the SNMP manager is using to access the addresses in this device. So any questions on SNMP managers and MIBs? Okay. Now there are public MIBs, which are basically just templates for standard devices, and they can conform to IETF device specifications. And these public MIBs are preloaded into KEPServerEX, so they're already available for you when you're ready to connect to SNMP type devices. And you can see some of the files that you have an option to import in a screenshot there. Private MIBs are going to be specific to a device series or model, and typically you can download this or obtain the .mib file from the device manufacturer. So there's a screenshot of a manufacturer that posted online some MIBs that they have for their switches that you can download in order to connect to that switch. Okay, now SNMP agents. As the name agent implies, they're all about passing information and handling communication. So an SNMP agent is going to exist actually on an SNMP-enabled device. The agent handles communication between the device and the managers. And it uses the index that are going to be sent by the manager, these long strings of numbers, the 12.1.2, to look up items in the MIB. It does a lookup and then communicate real-time information about the device item. So what's happening is the structure is really kind of master-slave hierarchy. You have an SNMP manager that's maybe installed, it's a piece of software installed on a computer, and it's communicating to the agents that are local to the device and requesting information of them. Okay. Now, managed devices in the SNMP world, it means that they have this SNMP agent dedicated in their memory space. So there's a little SNMP agent on the device, local to the device, and that's when that's what we call the managed device. Now, the SNMP agent is going to access this MIB file that also is local to device memory. And there are items or objects, as we discussed, defined in that MIB file that the SNMP agent uses to do the lookup whenever a manager requests information from it. There are such things as unmanaged devices. So if you have an unmanaged device, which means maybe it's a very simple Ethernet switch, it doesn't have that SNMP agent, it's not SNMP-enabled, it's unmanaged. So are you completely blind to it? Not necessarily. You can use a heartbeat poll to verify that that device is live. Okay, so any questions on SNMP agents or managed or unmanaged devices? I have one question. It says, does the MIB reside on the PC? So a MIB resides local to SNMP-enabled device, so it's on the device memory, and you also need to have it on the computer that the SNMP manager is installed on, so that the SNMP manager can use it to look up things in that device. Okay, last terminology, I swear, and then we'll get on to the more fun part of this demonstration. Object identifiers, OIDs. So object identifiers refer to that long string of numbers that you get when you go down through the MIB and append all those index numbers in the hierarchy. And object identifiers are always preceded by this 1.3.6.1.4.1. And that's just because of the structure preceding that was defined by the IETF. So 3 is organization, 6 is Department of Defense, 1 is Internet, 4 is private, 1 is enterprises. Now 3144, that's an enterprise ID. 3144 is Kepware's enterprise ID. So this is never going to change. It's 136141. This will change depending on the device manufacturer, the software manufacturer. And then this is where we get into actually device-specific information. So remember the toaster example where we had 12.1.2 to access the toaster manufacturer information. So OIDs can get extremely long. They can get very complicated. And as you can see, it can be hard to tell exactly what type of information you're accessing if you just are looking at this long string of numbers. So that's where it helps to understand MIB structure, how it relates to OIDs. So here we have 3144.12.2.3.1.1, and we finally have gotten to this channel 1 random tag that the server is generating. And this is actually generated from the server. We have the ability from our SNMP agent to generate MIB files. Okay, so that was a lot of terminology, but we made it through. I'm very excited to be done with that section. Any questions there? Okay. Now, finally, we're going to move on to SNMP and KEPServerEX. So now that you have a little bit of this background terminology, move on to the product portion of the webinar. Now we have an SNMP agent plugin. Like I said, I'm going to go over this very quickly. The SNMP agent plugin acts as an SNMP agent, so it makes us act as an SNMP device to higher level administration system. So the scenario here is that you're an IT person or a network administrator and you want to speak to a device that's not speaking SNMP. So for example, you have an Allen Bradley PLC on the plant floor and the network management system wants to suck in its timestamp. So basically in network management, you can talk to this PC, you can talk to the switch, but you have no way to talk to this PLC because it's not speaking SNMP. So with KEPServerEX, SNMP agent plugin, we connect to this device using another protocol, using KEPServerEX some driver, and then you use the plugin to pass that PLC information up to the network management system. So it's really for IT professionals. You can gather information from any of our drivers and convert it to SNMP and leverage OPC communication through KEPServerEX as well. So interesting, this is what it looks like. I have a Yokogawa controller here that I've mapped to SNMP with an OID. And then I'm going to go ahead and export a MIB file, and that MIB file will get consumed by the network management system to be able to access that PLC information. So this short and sweet of SNMP agent, like I said, not doing a demo, mostly because it's for IT professionals who want access to PLC information instead of the other way around, which we'll talk about in a minute. So, poll, would you find the SNMP agent helpful in your current system? All right. It looks like it's a pretty good split between yes and unsure. So that's nice to see that you would potentially find that helpful. And Sam will be doing an SNMP webinar later in the year that will go in much more detail about the agent if you're interested in that. Okay, great. Now we're going to go into the SNMP Manager driver, and this is where we get into the demo. So as you could probably conclude, the SNMP driver is going to act as a manager from the server to SNMP-enabled devices. So this is the opposite scenario. This time of year, if you're a process or controls engineer and you want to get information into your HMI about devices, network devices that are speaking SNMP. So for example, you want to display the status of your primary network switch on one of your operator panels. You know, a switch goes down in the middle of the night. Do you want to call IT, or do you want to have the ability to identify that issue and fix it yourself? And then as your device network grows and you need more IT infrastructure, probably be helpful to know how your switches are performing. So you can talk to all these SNMP devices on your network layer using our SNMP driver and roll that information up. You can roll it up into historians, GUIs, you could alarm off it, and so on and so forth. So before, when you were maybe just blind to these Ethernet components and you're only communicating with the PLCs, now you can communicate using SNMP with that Ethernet component layer as well. Okay, so before we start the demo, how many of you would find the SNMP driver helpful in your current configuration? All right, thank you for answering. Perfect. Great. So it looks like many more of you are more sure that you would use SNMP driver, and that's pretty much what I suspected, that the use case would be stronger for the SNMP driver in this group. Okay, finally, the coup de resistance, our demo. So we're going to connect to an SNMP-enabled device using the SNMP driver, and that's what I demoed very quickly for you at the beginning of this webinar. Our demo device is Comtrol, so a special thanks to Comtrol for giving us this switch for testing purposes. It's a Rocket Lynx ES8510. And this is an industrial Ethernet switch that is just linked up in our test lab. I'm going to open KEPServerEX again. Again, I see blank information here, and I'm going to click to add a channel. I'm going to name this Comtrol. I'm just going to be smart about my naming since that's the device manufacturer. If I need to come back to it later. Choosing the SNMP driver again. No virtual networking. Virtual network is just a common window in all of our drivers, or most of our drivers, as well as write optimization, so I'm just going to leave most of this at default. Our defaults are meant to get you working the first time. So if you're not sure, typically you can just leave it at default and you'll be okay. And I finished, so very few windows I had to worry about there. Again, just selected the SNMP driver and specified my network interface card. I'm going to add a device. I'm going to put in the device model here. And my device ID, again, it's just the IP address. I'm going to leave scan mode at default. I'm just going to respect whatever my client wants to keep that rate at. Same with timing. If you're in the Ethernet world, you can definitely optimize these timing settings. For example, you probably don't need a full second for a request timeout, but I'm just going to leave that at default for the purposes of this demo. Same with auto demotion. Now, SNMP communications. SNMP, there's a version 1, 2C, and 3, and we do support all 3. In your device manual, it will tell you what that device supports. So I know this device supports version 2C. So I'm going to go with that. But you will have to do a little digging and know your device to understand which version you need to use. And I'm going to go ahead and leave this checked. It's just a get bulk command for version 2C and version 3. Now, default port for communication with SNMP is 161, and you can choose a UDP or TCP protocol there. I know my device is 161, keeps that default port, and that is UTP. So luckily, most of the stuff here is just already set up to be default when I created this device. Okay, now communities. Communities are interesting. It's another piece of terminology I didn't explicitly explain. Basic thing you got to know about communities is that if it's a public community, typically that's read-only. You're going to only be able to read stuff from that device. If it's a private community device, you can read-write. So I'm going to leave this public. And then items per request, how much I want to bundle up in my read request. I can go all the way up to 99. Default's 25. I'm going to leave it at default. But if you do want to optimize those request bundles, if you are going to be reading a lot from this device, you can pump that up. And then these log error messages and deactivate tags. Now remember, when we're using these management information-based files, these MIB files, there could be things defined in that MIB file that actually don't exist on that device. And you kind of see it down here when we first connected. We were requesting something that didn't exist in the device. So what we're going to do is just log an error if that actually doesn't exist on the device and deactivate that tag by default. Okay, so in our MIB import settings, we have the option to basically choose some standard devices. So for example, if I choose an Ethernet switch with 4 ports, KEPServer is going to recommend the templated public MIBs that I should import for that type of device. And then for each of these MIBs, it's going to create 4 different items for each of those 4 Ethernet switch ports. So if I choose something else, it'll recommend different public MIBs for me. I'm going to go ahead and go with none. So it's going to recommend just the system RFC1213 is a very popular MIB for switches. I'm going to remove that and click Add. And I see I actually have a huge list of MIBs here that come with the server. I actually have the ES8510 in that MIB selection list. So luckily for me, I can just select that. If I didn't see the MIB for my device in here, I could always browse and look on my computer for maybe a MIB file that I had downloaded previously. So I'm going to select Control ES8510 and next. Now traps, another piece of terminology I didn't discuss, basically just unsolicited messages coming from that device. They come in through port 162, and that can be protocol UDP or TCP. Just going to leave that enabled. Traps can also be assigned a public or private community, so read-only or read-write. And you can specify how many events you're going to allow to come through from that device. So I'm just going to leave those at default, click Finish, and it's going to auto-generate my tags for me. And I see I have my control information here. My events, these are my trap events that I can receive from the device, and my RFC. Okay, so if I launch my quick client, I can see that I have information coming in from that device. And I got information from what the system name for that device is, what type of switches it is. It tells me industrial managed Ethernet switch, and just a bunch of information below that. So that all came in with the MIB, and no events coming in right now. Okay, so next thing I want to show you is, say you don't have a lot of information about the device that you're connecting to. If you go ahead and go into channel properties, after you exit the wizard for channel creation, this little device discovery tab pops up in channel properties. So maybe you don't even have the exact IP address. You just know there's an SNMP device out there. You know there's a switch out there. You're not exactly sure where it is or how to connect to it. You can enter an IP address range. And of course, since I already know the IP address of my device, I'm just going to enter that one specifically. But you can enter a range here and pick, your version preference and your ports, and click OK. And we're going to go ahead and scan and see what devices are out there. So it found me the device, that control device again, and it tells me what version it's running and everything. And if I go ahead and double-click this device, it actually creates the device for me automatically. So I didn't have to go through the wizard, didn't have to set any of that configuration on my own. It automatically did it for me. So if I click OK here and exit, I can see that it just used the RFC 1213 MIB to generate device tags. It generated some trap tags for me. And if I launch my quick client and look at what the information is coming through here from that RFC 1213 MIB, it's pretty much the same information, right? So basically showing you that there's multiple ways to skin a cat here. These MIBs, again, they're just a hierarchy. They're a file hierarchy giving you addresses. So this RFC 1213 address here is pointing to the same as this control one here. So I get same type of information, multiple ways to do it, depending on what you know about your device and how comfortable you are setting this stuff up. Okay, last thing I want to show you is something called Network Analyst. I can enable Network Analyst tags for however many ports I have on that switch, so specifically for switches. And if I look at the Network Analyst tags, this is specific to KEPServerEX. This is KEPServerEX SNMP Driver functionality that comes with the driver. And it shows me percent bandwidth utilization into the switch, percent out, and then gives me some bandwidth utilization statistics. So that's nice, especially planning for network growth. You can see how taxed is that switch, what's coming in and out of it. If a port's down, you can see that it's blocked, and so on and so forth. So that's the Network Analyst feature that you can access through device properties, and that does come specifically with KEPServerEX. Okay, very last part of the demo, I'm going to show you a program called Ping It First. So if I go to my Kepware program folder, KEPServerEX and utilities, we have Ping It First here. Now this is a utility. It's an application independent to KEPServerEX. And this is very helpful because let's pretend you want to connect to this device, but no matter what you do, the MIB files that you're uploading, you can't get the MIB file from the device manufacturer, so you don't know how to connect to the device because you can't find the correct MIB file. You can do something called a walk MIB and Ping It First, and you just enter device IP and SNMP version, again, enter a start object identifier address, and if I click again walk here, I see I'm communicating with the device, and it passes me back a bunch of information about that device. And actually, same type of information I was getting when I was connected with the quick client. So if I save results here, it's going to save off as a CSV. And if I open this up, I can see I have all type of information about the OIDs that were in that device, what their data type was, and what their value was. And I can use this to go on further and import that information into my server and create tags from that information. Okay, ping it first you can send a trap, you can do a get set. So for those of you familiar with SNMP protocol, that might be useful, and you can also do a simple device discovery. So we have all kinds of features on the server to help you get connected to these SNMP devices and really make it as easy as possible. So just in summary, SNMP driver features, we do support 1, 2C, and 3, and that includes security and authentication in version 3. We do support traps and notifications in Inform handling. We have a network analyst specific to KEPServerEX to help you look at the bandwidth utilization in your managed switches. We have the device discovery, and we do automatically import those MIB files and do tag generation off of them. The great thing about KEPServerEX, though, is that we also have, beyond just SNMP driver, we have our plugins like Data Logger, like our ODBC client driver, like advanced tags. So you can get this SNMP information into our server and then log it off to a database. Or like I said, pass it up to your HMI and display information on your HMI. Or pull it into advanced tags and link it to a PLC, or do calculations off of it, or run logic off of it. So for example, say a switch fails, maybe you have logic in advanced tags or in your HMI that says switch over to this other switch or this other bus if that switch is failing. So really wide capabilities when you consider using the SNMP driver specifically with KEPServerEX. I'm getting a question, can I demonstrate a tag created from the CSV data? I will do that right after this poll, so I'll show you how to do that. So last poll here, do you now or will you in the future use KEPServerEX's SNMP features? So either you're currently using them, either you want to try it out, you think you could see yourself using it in the future, you're unsure, or you don't think you're going to use it. Okay, thank you everybody for voting. Looks great. I'm going to share this with you. So some of you are already using, some say, yes, I plan that for the future. So about 50% either in the yeses, and then 50% unsure, and only a couple there are no, so that's very good to see. Of course, that makes me happy. Okay, I'm going to get to some of the questions here. Like I said, you can always contact us, training@kepware.com, if you have further questions, as well as our sales and technical support. Contact us by phone, and you can download the fully functional demo at kepware.com. All right, so that concludes the formal presentation portion of this. I will go ahead and start answering some of your questions. First question I had was, show me a CSV tag creation using these OIDs in this CSV file. So basically what you have to do is take this CSV file that you have here and map it to our general CSV file. So if I export CSV from the device, and I open that up, it shows me what the CSV looks like for our device tags. So I have tag name, address, so on and so forth. So if I want to, for example, add a tag in here, what I could do is take information from thanks. Someone says, I had the pull up, so thanks for showing that. So I'll just demonstrate that real quick again. So I have this device, and I'm going to export CSV, and this is going to export a CSV in just our general tag format CSV. So now I have this device CSV that shows information for the tags for that device, and it has a tag name, an address, and so on and so forth. So now if I wanted to add tags from the control CSV, all I would have to do is basically map these OID fields and data type, map that to this tag address data type information CSV for the device itself. And then once I'm done doing my mapping, I can just import that CSV again, and it would generate those tags for me. So you do have, it's a little manual process. You have to do the mapping from the device CSV to the, from the control, MIB export CSV to the device CSV, but you can do it fairly programmatically that way. Okay. Do you have any other good questions over there, Sam?
Yeah, there's lots. Can we pick one?
Yeah, pick one.
Okay.
So I'm going to have Sam pick a couple more interesting questions that would be relevant to the general audience. And we'll try to get as many questions in as we can, and then before we sign off.
Oh yeah, okay, here's one. Are there firewall or other security issues that hamper comms between the device and the driver?
Okay.
The answer is potentially, yeah, if the ports aren't open.
So the question was, are there firewall or other security issues that would affect communication between our server and the device? And the answer to that is yes, there potentially could if there's ports not open. Other issues I could think of is maybe you're using that default port 161. Maybe for some reason it's changed on that device, and that's a device setting. So you do need to know these devices slightly, and probably interface with your IT group to kind of understand how to connect if you're having issues connecting. So it's a great question. Okay, yeah, questions about Ping It First. And is the Ping It First utility a third-party application, or is it an existing tool within Kepware? Ping It First is a Kepware tool. It's not third-party. It's a separate software application from KEPServerEX, but it installs with KEPServerEX if you select it to install. So when I go to All Programs and I go to my Kepware folder, KEPServerEX Utilities, that's where the Ping It First utility lives, and that'll install with KEPServerEX if you select that when you're going through the product install. So just a little utility we wrote to help you guys connect and experiment with these SNMP devices. And yes, Sam Picaro is saying that he reinstalled KEPServerEX and that it showed up in his utility list. So if you don't see it in your utility list, you might need to do a reinstall to see it there. And of course, we're getting the question, is the presentation available for download? We will be posting the YouTube video to our website. As far as the presentation goes, we will send out the PDF of the slides in our follow-up email. And like I said, we'll also have all that good poll data for you available. We'll tell you how many people attended the webinar and what your answers were to the questions on our blog. Okay, Sam, do you have any?
Yeah, one of them is pretty interesting here, or they're all pretty interesting, but one of them, can KEPServer do native export to CSV on a scheduled basis, like every 15 minutes, and we would be able to do that?
So we have a question, could we do that CSV export, could we do that on a schedule, basically schedule a CSV export every so often, if you wanted to save off the tag CSV or the device CSV? The answer is no, we can't do that at this time. Yeah. Okay. I'm also getting a question about licensing. How is it licensed? It's licensed individually. I'm not sure if it's in our manufacturing suite. So let's look at the product list here. And some pricing for you. So we do price based on how many devices you're connecting to. So it's $9.95 for the first level. And let's go into the manufacturing suite. And look and see if it is considered a standard driver. So SNMP is considered a premium driver, so you would have to purchase it in addition to your manufacturing suite. Of course, our sales team is always willing to work with you if you have issues with the pricing or something like that. So can I install only the driver component? Is a question about install. Yes, you can choose to only install the driver, SNMP driver. This plugin drop-down list, when you go through the install, you have the option of installing these plugins separately. So if you don't want to install the SNMP agent plugin, you don't have to.
Julian, one other question. Customer said, can you show me the traffic load of the ports of that switch? I was looking for which port has the chatty thing on it. Are we communicating something that we can show that?
I don't think we can show because the ES8510 is actually not doing any type of communication. So if you look, for example, I have the network analyst tags in here for this device. So I've opened up my quick client and connected to this ES5810. You would see that these should all show up 0 once it refreshes. So I'm getting 0 right now for bandwidth utilization because there's no traffic going through that switch. So I can't show you that, unfortunately, right now in the live demo. That would be definitely a great follow-up to this webinar. Maybe Sam can arrange that for when he covers SNMP later in the year, actually show you traffic through a switch and what that looks like in our network analyst tags. That was a good question.
Another one. Another customer wanted to see the interface for configuring V3 security. We would need to have a device that supports V3 security to go through all of the steps, but if you could just maybe pop up that window.
Sure, which one? Device
yeah,
properties?
Device and then the security.
Okay, so we're going to look at V3 security. So I just select version 3. And this is where you would set up that version 3 security. So username, context name, security level. So if I choose something with authentication, then you have to put in passphrase of verify authentication style. So this device actually doesn't support V3 and security, so we can't do it with the demo device we have now, but this is what that security setup window would look like. Good question.
And we're getting requests for Linux.
Yep, I see those requests for Linux come through. I actually saw quite a few come through. So we will keep you updated on our support of the Linux platform. No updates so far, nothing in the roadmap, but we'll keep you updated. I'm sure that would be a big advantage for some of you. So here's the question, how many KEP servers can you run with the SNMP driver at the same time? KEP server, the application, you just run one instance of the runtime. So you install KEPServer and you're just going to have one runtime going. And then within a runtime, you can configure multiple connections to multiple devices. So I can make multiple SNMP connections and multiple SNMP channels in this one server interface. And each channel that I create is going to act as another thread. So it's going to be parallel communication. So I can go ahead and actually create a bunch of channels all the way down the line and add devices under those channels. So if I go to Help Support Information Versions, I can actually look up and see how many channels we support within a single KEPServerEX install. So we support up to 256 channels, and then under each of those channels, we support up to 100 devices. So we support quite a large number of devices within a single KEPServerEX install. So a great question from Faith. If you were to identify the top 1 or 2 features and benefits of KEPServerEX, what would those be? I'd say I just demoed one of the most important features, and that is that it's all within this one server, which means that you can set up your SNMP devices on this server. If I wanted to go ahead and set up an Allen Bradley device on the server, I could do that very simply, and they would just all be on the same server, very easy to access all the devices through just this one server. And we do support up to 150 protocols that you can set up all just on one KEPServerEX. And the software application actually has no limits as far as I/O point count or number of devices, typically, except a very high limit like 256 channels like I just showed you. But we don't limit you in I/O tag count or anything like that. And we do support up to 150 different types of communication to different protocols. Great question from Emmanuel. Are the devices serialized under a channel? Yes, they are serialized under a channel. So if you have multiple devices in one channel, they're going to need to take turns communicating. If you have devices in separate channels, it's like a multi-lane highway. They can communicate in parallel. So our recommendation for optimization with the server is always one channel per device. That's if you're using Ethernet type devices. Obviously that won't work with serial. And if throughput is your highest concern. So you're really just concerned about getting your data back as fast as possible. Yep, so as a great question from Tim, as with connections to PLCs, we would still recommend one channel per device with SNMP. May depend on your setup. You could have limitations, but one channel per device is our general rule of thumb for most every driver, besides the serial ones. And yes, Joseph, you can send traps. Okay, so we're kind of getting towards the hour mark here, and I want to wrap this up. So for those of you who, we missed your questions, there were almost 250 of you on this webinar, so we apologize if we missed that. We will follow up with you with an email. I want to thank Sam. He did an amazing job. He was furiously typing away the whole webinar, answering your questions as I presented. And I want to thank you guys. Thank you so much for participating in the polls. April's going to go ahead and sign me out.
Okay, thank you for participating in today's webinar on SNMP Connectivity with KEPServerEX. As Joanne said, we will send you additional information on this topic by email, and we will make a recording of this webinar available on Kepware's YouTube channel within 24 to 48 hours. If you have any questions that were not addressed today, please contact a Kepware representative by email. This concludes our webinar. Thank you for joining, and have a great day.